Gather round, Oklahoma City Thunder fans. I'm here to tell you that the 50th overall pick, Keyontae Johnson, he's got the juice. All coming up on today's Locked On Thunder podcast.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com, Ryland Styles. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, lothunderpod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by Prize Picks, we're diving into Keyontae Johnson is dripping with juice for this Oklahoma City Thunder team. Did they find another two-way gem? Plus, our first roster projection since the NBA draft and ahead of free agency, and what should be the expectation for the Oklahoma City Thunder next season. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. All right, Keyontae Johnson, 50th overall pick for the Thunder. He was 38th on my big board entering the draft. He is 6'5" or 6'6", somewhere in that range, with a 7-foot wingspan, 238 pounds. This great body, great athlete. He's extremely bouncy. He can accelerate into the air quickly, ascend into the air very quickly, and just hang there. Just be frozen in time. He is a fantastic cutter. He knows when to cut. He knows how to cut. So he understands when the situation calls for, hey, just float your way in there, flash your way slowly to the rim, and eventually the ball will find you. And when to dart in there full head of steam. The timings on his leaps into the air for these lobs are phenomenal. And he can get off the floor in a hurry. He has a strong finishing portfolio. He can give you those massive dunks. He can finish through contact, but he can also hit you with the up fake and finish around you, have these acrobatic finishes, and then also just textbook layups. Like, he does it all at the rim, which is how he shot 64% at the rim. As a cutter, Keyontae Johnson put up 1.354 points per possessions. You want to look at a number that starts with a 1 in that category to say, oh, that's good. And then, of course, when it goes 1.3, it's really good for Keyontae Johnson and for his potential with the Thunder. He's also great in transition. He fills the lanes properly. He is great whenever he gets a rebound. He knows where to hit the ball ahead to next. And he can also go coast to coast. Like, that's also a part of his bag where he can just dribble his way to the rim and finish coast to coast. He did that against Kansas where he gets this rebound off of a missed free throw and just goes coast to coast and finishes. Like, he can do that. He can do that. He is a savvy basketball player. He understands what to do at all times. It always feels like Keyontae Johnson's in control whenever you watch him. And then he has a sweet stroke. I mean, he shot 46%. 46% on catch and shoot looks. And so whenever you evaluate how Keyontae Johnson was used at Kansas State, it's all going to sound pretty familiar to you. Kansas State had a nifty point guard who can make all the passes in the world, and Noel found him in the dunker spot as a cutter, just dumping the ball off to him after Noel penetrates to the basket. And then those catch and shoot looks was from Noel just putting his head down, getting to the rack, and then dishing out whenever the defense collapses and commits to him. He dishes out to a wide open guy at the corner, and boom, Keyontae Johnson's there for you and knocks it down. Those are all skill sets, and those are all ways, and really the primarily and only ways that he'll be used in Oklahoma City. And he's comfortable in all of those spots, plus in transition, which is a requirement really for a team that was third in the league in pace last year and is going to be running, and is a young team that's built on running. It's built on positionless basketball, built on grab and go style. But his success doesn't stop on the offensive end. Defensively, as an isolation defender, Keyontae Johnson allowed his matchup to shoot just 30% from the floor. In overall defense, Keyontae Johnson was in the 91st percentile. He is this long, lengthy guy that has the ability to just chase around players all around the court and stay connected to his matchup's hip. He would have Hall of Fame pick dodger. He would have Hall of Fame couch sitter because he can just sit in his stance and stay in front of you no matter what moves you try to make. And if you somehow get past him, you're not past him for long because of his great recovery skills. And he just disrupts offenses. He annoys offenses. And he brings that energy and that kind of edge to him that the Thunder look for. He's going to let you know about it whenever he deflects a pass, and even if it goes out of bounds, he's going to be clapping. He's going to be letting you know about it. I think he's going to thrive in Oklahoma City. I think not only does his skill traits, his talents morph perfectly into the Thunder style of basketball, but when you think more specifically about, here's a guy that will be put in this system with these coaches, with this team identity, and you stick him on that two-way contract, you put him with the Blue to start the year, and you put him with Cam Woods, who I don't think it should be undersold at all how good Cam Woods is at developing and polishing defense and polishing players. These players have talked about Cam Woods' impact on them since he was an assistant with the Thunder, and then last year with the Blue, you got to truly see it. Jalen Williams does not look like the same player he did at the start of the year, as opposed to what he looked like after he played with Cam Woods. Lindy Waters, same thing. Like, these guys got a lot better with Cam. Eugene Omoruyi, shout out to him, got his contract picked up yesterday. He did not look like the same player at all after playing with the Blue, compared to even his previous stops in the NBA. So getting that polish from a coaching staff that can develop defense, we've seen them develop defense their entire tenure here, even though for a long time they were not given the proper tools, so to say. They still had a really good defense, and now they are getting the proper tools, the proper ingredients to blend together a really good defense. So Keyontae Johnson has staying power. Like, he has the right stuff to be one of these guys that carves out an NBA role for himself, even though he was picked 50th overall. And from everything that you've heard from Sam since the night of the draft, all the way to the introductory press conference, like, all the medical stuff checks out. All the other off the court diligence checks out. They did their work. And as I said on draft night, I understand the concerns on both parts, off the court and also with the medicals. But this organization, specifically in Oklahoma City, has earned the trust that they have done all their homework and that it all kind of aligns with what they need to see. So I'm extremely excited about Keyontae Johnson, and I think that hearing his play style and hearing his good qualities will make you excited about him too. But then there's the bigger question. Okay, well, how does he play in Oklahoma City? Like how does he literally get on the court? What is his future in Oklahoma City? This is a roster that is chock full to the brim, and that already has a roster crunch entering this year. And that part of alleviating that roster crunch was the ability to trade 37 and then pick at 50 and put 50 on a two-way deal. And it just so happened to be Keyontae Johnson, who's a really good player, that fell to 50. But long term, how does this even matter if they cannot find the roster spot for him? What is the pathway to minutes? What is the pathway to a roster spot for Keyontae Johnson? We're going to talk about that coming up. But first, I want to say right now, my good friends over at Prize Picks, folks. Prize Picks is there for you with a 100% deposit match up to $100. Use the code Locked On at prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app. Folks, to me, Prize Picks, it just makes watching games more fun, more exciting, because you can load up Prize Picks and pick 2 to 6 players and just guess will they score more or less than their Prize Pick projections. and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There is no competing against other players, so you don't have to worry about people who study this for a living competing against you and beating up on you. It's just you versus the projections. And you can do this for any sport you watch: NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men and women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Eurobasket, and more. So what this is you can sit down tonight, watch a baseball game, and you can say, I think that Shohei Ohtani will have more than 1.5 hits, and I think that Mike Trout will have less than 2.5 hits. And if you're right, boom, you win. And there you go. So you can go check it out today at prizepicks.com. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up today. And whenever you do, use the code LOCKEDON, and you'll get an instant deposit match up to $100 with prizepicks.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. How does Keyontae Johnson get a role in Oklahoma City for a roster that is so packed full? Well, right now it's easy. Right now he's on one of the Thunder's 3 two-way deals, according to Sam Presti on Saturday. And admittedly, of course, the roster is crowded. So how does this move forward? How does he get a standard NBA contract? Well, the first and foremost path is this is likely going to be a multi-year two-way situation, but let's forget about that for a second, no matter what the two-way situation is for him. To me, the most likely path for him to get a standard contract, he starts on the two-way, plays the majority of the season, let's say up until the trade deadline, on the two-way. That's been a common trend. You know, Aaron Wiggins played up until the deadline, even though the Thunder knew that he was going to be on a standard deal. I was saying that the whole season where, Wiggins and the Thunder, they both knew he was going to be on a standard deal, but if you remember that year, they had that extra cap space that they were trying to turn into an asset, so they didn't want to convert anything yet until the deadline, and so then he eventually gets converted. So I say that as in we've seen a history of waiting until the middle of the season. This year, Gino and Lindy were converted in the middle of the season. Now, with Keyontae Johnson, it'd be a different story. With Keyontae Johnson, let's say he hits. Let's say that we're right about like the fit and the skill set, and it all translates and it all looks good in OKC. If we're right about that and he hits, the pathway for him to be in OKC long-term, to be on a standard contract, would be a scenario like this playing out. If Keyontae Johnson hits, could you maybe take, 2 role players who you like, but they're 2 role players, throw in a sweetener or 2 of like second-round picks or whatever, and you cash in 2 role players that are good, plus some picks or a sweetener or whatever you want to throw in, for one really good rotational piece, like one extraordinary rotational piece, top of the chart, top of your bench unit kind of guy. It's where you've traded in 2 or 3 roster spots for one, and so you get back that really good, you get back that extraordinarily good piece for a couple good pieces, and then you convert Keyontae Johnson to a standard deal because he can fill in the gaps of the depth you lost in that trade. And then from there, you sign Keyontae to a Sam Presti special, which is that 3-year deal where the second and third years are partially guaranteed and then non-guaranteed, or including an option. He has to prove it, obviously. Like, this is all for naught if he doesn't prove it. But I think he has the juice, and I think that this would be a pathway to him getting the standard contract. It would be realizing he's good enough to supplement some of that depth loss in a trade, and then making a trade where you consolidate some of your role players for a really good rotation piece. So you consolidate some of your good for great, and then you move in Keyontae Johnson to that depth spot where you've lost out on. To me, that's really the only path for him to be on a standard deal, because the roster is so full, and because it's not only full this year, but you're going to have picks in the future that are going to be vying for or jostling for spots on this roster. And next year you might have 3 first-round picks where you can't stash him on a two-way deal. So obviously you need to make a trade at that point too. So the way for Keyontae Johnson to pan out would be kind of a consolidation trade where you consolidate a couple good bench pieces for one really, really good one, and then Keyontae fills in the gap on the depth. But I think it can happen. I think it can happen closer to the deadline, and that's why I think the Thunder want to remain flexible with what they're going to do with their cap space, what they're going to do with their roster spots here in the next few days. I think they're going to remain flexible. Speaking of those roster spots, let's have our first Thunder roster projection. So currently right now, the Thunder have 17 guys under contract. They have one two-way, so they have 16 standard deals. And that number has to get down to 15 by opening night. As of right now, you can carry 20 guys on your roster. So that's all right. You don't need to worry about it right this second, but eventually you're going to have to worry about it. So the current roster is SGA, Lou Dort, Josh Giddey, J-Dub, Chet Holmgren, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Kenrich Williams, Jay Will, Ousmane Dieng, Poku, Trey Mann, Davis Bertans, Keyontae Johnson, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, and Lindy Waters. Free agents right now that played for the Thunder last year, Dario Saric, Jared Butler, and Olivier Sarr. Decisions the Thunder have to make this offseason. Today, at some point, they have to make the decision on Lindy Waters. They can agree to move this deadline if they want to, but as of this second, the deadline is today, and it is for the $1.9 million owed to Lindy Waters on the team option. So the Thunder can just decline that and get rid of his roster spot, and therefore they're able to kind of then be in roster compliance already, or they could pick it up. Now, I will say this: no matter what they do today with Lindy Waters, it doesn't determine anything. It is no indicator of anything. Even if they pick up his team option, it's only $1.9 million, and somebody has to get cut in October. So you might say, hey, we're going to pick up his option. We're going to give him the $1.9 million, and then we're going to cut him. I mean, the same type of situation happened with Isaiah Roby. And you can let this linger into, the preseason and into training camp and all that good stuff. But I will say, the last time we talked about letting it linger with Isaiah Roby, I mean, they just declined it, and he was picked up by the Spurs right away. Lindy Waters, I think, will have suitors as well. So it might be beneficial for both sides to just decline it because the Thunder get into compliance for their roster. And then Lindy Waters gets on his new team, and he gets to assimilate to them pretty quickly. So that's the first decision to make. The next decision is if by the end of tomorrow, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is on the team, his $1.9 million will get fully guaranteed. Right now, if they waived him before the end of tomorrow, you can waive him and you only pay part of that. It gets fully guaranteed if he's on the team after tomorrow. But again, these are two numbers that are very insignificant. It's significant to you and me, but to the NBA teams, it's a drop in the bucket. They could cut both these guys and not care for $2 million. But nonetheless, that's what's on the docket today. My prediction for how this all ends, at the end of it all in October, would be Lindy Waters is no longer on the team. The Thunder really like Lindy Waters. They really believe in him. They really believe he can be an NBA player, and so do all of you listening probably. But at some point, it's just not the right timing on certain teams. So just like Isaiah Roby, he'll get another shot, and hopefully he has a better go of it than Isaiah Roby did on his second spot. But he'll get another shot, but I just don't think it's going to be in Oklahoma City. But past Lindy Waters, the other three names, the other two names I think are on the hot seat would be, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl and Trey Mann. But I think that you get more credence, you get more leeway whenever you're an actual draft pick, especially a first-round pick in Trey Mann's case. So I really think it comes down to Lindy or JRE. And the Thunder love Lindy Waters, but mechanically it's just so much easier to be rid of Lindy than it is Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. But I really would be shocked if it kind of came down to anyone but those two guys in terms of just outright cutting them. Expectations for this season are going to be extremely high for the fan base, and it's going to be something that cannot be tempered because of how fun last year was. And you want and remember what it was like to watch contending teams in Oklahoma City, and you want that back so bad because you got a little taste of it last year. But just as fans began to buy in last year, the season, of course, was shutting down, and you were playing on the road for the play-in and didn't get to come back home. So the fans who bought back in at the end of last year after kind of going on a little hiatus, they're gnawing at the bit to get back out there for the start of the season. And the Thunder have one of the most fun, incredible young rosters. But how will this all shake out? After the draft and before free agency, before the offseason, before we see any potential league-changing news, as of this moment in time, what are the expectations for the Oklahoma City Thunder entering next season? What's the ceiling? What's the floor? We'll talk about that coming up. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Here's your rotation for the Thunder next year. Starting lineup, I think, will be SGA, Josh Giddey, Lou Dort, J-Dub, Chet Holmgren. Pretty simple. I think that your bench unit, like that you need to play heavy minutes, will be Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Kenrich Williams, and Jay Will. I think those guys will produce the most wins for you. However, rotationally, you still have to work in Poku. You still have to work in Usman Jang, especially. The Thunder still really believe in Usman Jang. And you still got to work in Trey Mann if he's here. So then you're left with, hey, it's a work in progress. Throughout this season, as it progresses, you put in Keyontae Johnson. And then your last roster spot, Davis Bertans, you put him kind of, is he still even hanging around here in that category of oh yeah, this guy does play for the Thunder whenever he checks in for the first time in 15 games and shoots, 3 for 4 maybe and helps you win a ball game. That's the benefit of Davis Bertans is that he can get hot from 3, but he's not going to be a staple of this rotation probably. He'll have nights where he goes DNP. He'll have a 3-night stretch where he goes DNP, and then he'll play again. And then we'll be oh yeah, they could use that shooting, and then we'll go back to DNP. It's kind of in that similar vein to Muscala and Saric of what they were doing. But the hype for SGA, the hype for the progression of J-Dub and Josh Giddey and Jang, the hype for Chet Holmgren's debut has been over a year in the making, and you have guys like Pat Bev hyping him up on his podcast. It's all great to see the excitement back in Oklahoma City, and it's all great to see, what this team could be. And right now, we're in that spot where we're allowing ourselves to envision it all going great. Oh, everyone's going to progress. Everyone's going to get better. These guys are so young; they're all going to get better. Sometimes young guys don't get better. Sometimes young guys regress. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but sometimes it doesn't go that way. So what should be the realistic expectations for this team? I think the tippity-top ceiling for this team, everything goes right for them, would be that they play in the 4-5 series. It could be the 4, could be the 5. At that point, it doesn't really matter, but they're in that 4-5 series where they might have home court, and then they might be the 5 seed. I think that there's going to be enough good NBA teams or good Western Conference teams that will bump them out of the top 3. And then you're in that 4-5. I think that the floor for this team is the 10th seed. Now, I know the West is going to be tough. And I know that on paper in a couple of weeks, by the time that trades happen, free agency happens, teams are going to look a lot better on paper. There are not 10 other teams, 11 other teams I can trust to take every game of the regular season as seriously as I can trust the Thunder to take them. There are not 11 other teams who I think have the depth to withstand an 82-game season like the Thunder do. You go through that rotation again, and Poku, Usman Jang, Trey Mann, Keyontae Johnson, Cason Wallace, Isaiah Joe, Wiggins, Kenrich Williams, Jay Will. As long as SGA is healthy for the entire season, which obviously that's the case for every team. Every team needs their best guy to be healthy. But as long as SGA is healthy for the entire season or close to it, the Thunder can mix and match and get a lot of good stuff from this team and a lot of depth from this team to where they can survive an 82-game season or better equipped to than some teams are. So again, find me the 11 teams who will take the regular season more seriously, who will, try as hard as the Thunder do night in and night out, and who will have the depth to compete for 82 games to bump them out of the 10th seed. So I think that that's their floor. So either way, postseason basketball will be in Oklahoma City. And I think that the truth is oftentimes in the middle. I think that this Thunder team might be a 6th seed where they're in the playoffs and they don't have to worry about the play-in tournament. They might be hosting a play-in tournament game, which is still an improvement from last year. So it'll be interesting to see how it all goes down. My point of this is, could the Thunder win 50-plus games? They could, sure. I think that this team is talented enough to do that. But if they don't win 50-plus games, that's not a failure. To me, a failure is missing the play-in tournament. Because we forget, rookie big men typically do not just get out of the gate running and impacting the game at a high level. Walker Kessler did it last year, though. So Chet Holmgren could be of that ilk where he's able to break that mold, and we think he is able to break that mold, and he'll be an impact right away. But that's a whole group that has to gel together. That's a whole group that has to gel together and play differently than the way that they played last time. And so with the learning curve and all that and the developmental curve, they should be a play-in team for sure. In my opinion, I would project them right now. If I had to do my preseason projections today before free agency, the Thunder are a playoff team, not a play-in team. They're going to be in the playoffs. But I just want to caution that if they don't make that plateau, it's not as though this season is a failure. So it's going to be a lot of fun the next couple of days. What's going to happen is free agency will open up tomorrow on Friday at 5 p.m. And trades are going to break out. Signings are going to break out. It's going to be haywire for a little bit. It's going to be a lot of fun. Then the dust will settle, and we'll see them Thunder play in Summer League starting on July 3rd. And it's just going to be awesome. It's just going to be awesome to watch this team and watch these young guys play. The new CBA is also here. You can go read it if you want to. It's available. The NBA sent us a PDF of it, in March, I want to say, but it was not the full thing. It was just what we knew at the time, and I couldn't understand it. So I tried to read it again last night. Not great. I will say that last night was crazy for people that work in the league. Agents told me, I had 2 agents tell me that their night was shot and it was just a crazy time. It was madness. I feel bad for them having to cram all this in before trying to go get their clients' contracts with the new CBA construct. And then of course teams capologists and teams front office members having to pull all-nighters and cram in this content, cram in this legalities and everything else. That's just a wild time. It's so wild that the CBA got dropped just a couple days before free agency. I will say that the agents did say that hey, this was coming. They knew it was coming. They just didn't know when it was coming, and it came out yesterday afternoon. So if you've read the CBA, congratulations to you. It was a tough read, but we did it. We got through it. So we had Keith Smith on last week to discuss the CBA and discuss all the changes in it. You can go back and listen to that on last week's podcast with Keith Smith about kind of the future of the Thunder with the new CBA. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.